That poor little girl was just washing car windows for milk, but the moment I saw her hands covering cuts, I asked who told you to do this, and her answer honestly left me speechless. You know what I mean? That morning in Boston, I was supposed to just grab breakfast for myself, maybe knock out some emails, but fate had other plans because right next to my Mercedes, shivering and quiet, was a kid who shouldn't have had to be tough, her small fingers raw and bleeding as she wiped my windshield, mumbling, "I just want milk," and those four words hit me harder than anything else in my life ever had because in a flash, I wasn't the guy in the tailored suit. I was that abandoned kid again, all the cold, the hunger, the loneliness coming back sharp and clear. The sunlight was barely pushing through the clouds that day, Boston wind slicing straight through my coat and my nerves, and as I stepped out with my carton of milk, the Shiwasa little girl couldn't have been older than 5, with tangled brown hair stuck to her pale cheeks. Her coat so thin I could see the bones in her wrists, jeans ripped and stained, but she just kept scrubbing, slow and careful, like if she moved too fast she'd fall over. Her eyes glued to the glass, never looking up. Not even when I stopped right next to her, and for a second I just stood there, frozen, staring at this tiny, stubborn person, milk and sandwiches getting colder in my hands, memory trying to choke me with the past. When I finally made myself move, I crouched down, got eye, and asked, soft as I could, "Who told you to do this?" And she flinched so hard she almost dropped her rag, but then she looked at me, big brown eyes full of everything you hope a kid never learns. Fear, hunger, exhaustion, and this little flicker of hope she didn't want to let me see, and she whispered, "Nobody told me. I just wanted to clean the car so I could earn enough to buy some milk." And let me tell you, that's the kind of sentence that sticks in your ribs and never comes out. So I did the only thing I could. I handed her my milk and my sandwich, and she looked at me like I was magic, like nobody had ever handed her food just because they could, her hands shaking, eyes darting, and when I asked where she lived, where her parents were, her voice cracked and she said, "I live with my stepfather, Rick. My mom passed away, and he says if I don't bring home money, we don't eat." The kind of truth a kid shouldn't have to say out loud. Not ever. Not to anyone. That's how I ended up driving her home a beat-up apartment building that looked like it should have been condemned, windows broken, trash bags piled by the door, the air thick with the smell of cigarettes, and something even uglier clutching the milk and a piece of bread like it was treasure, me trying to remember how to breathe. When Rick opened the door, he didn't look surprised, just annoyed-eyed, stinking of cheap booze, shirt filthy, hands out for money before I'd even said my name. "Give me $1,000. He said, "Call it back pay for raising her in, I swear." I wanted to hit him right there, but all I said was, "Children aren't for sale, and if you can't take care of her, I'll call Child Protective Services." He laughed in my face, said she was his, that I had no say, tried to pull her behind him, but I stepped in the way just long enough to get a look inside. Trash everywhere, empty bottles, a mattress on the floor, not a single toy or picture, no food but a can of beer and some stale noodles in the fridge, and her eyes begging me not to leave, even if her lips couldn't say it. He slammed the door, locked it up, and I stood there in the hallway for a long minute, trying to steady my hands, when I heard a raspy voice behind me, an old neighbor, white hair wild, eyes sharp, said, "If you really care, come back soon. That little girl doesn't have much time left, and let me tell you." That stuck with me all night. Couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything but the look on her face, so I went back, asked the neighbor across the hall for help, and over cups of tea, she told me the whole story. Emma, that's the girl's name, had been fending for herself for months, Rick living off her dead mother's benefits, getting nastier every time the money ran low, sometimes sending Emma to the street to beg, sometimes making her eat expired food from the trash, but always cold, never a kind word, never a hug, not even basic decency. The neighbor had thought about calling CPS, but she was scared, said Rick kept company with men who could ruin your life for crossing him. And so she just kept watch, made sure Emma was alive, and let me see the security camera feed Emma dragging trash, bringing Rick water, getting snapped at for every little thing, wiping up spills with her own sleeve, never crying, never speaking unless she had to. It was hell, and it was all too familiar, and I couldn't let it slide, so I started documenting everything. And when I saw Rick threatening Emma, shouting, grabbing her by the collar and lifting her off the floor, I knew I had to move fast, especially when the old woman across the hall pulled me aside and said, "Rick's talking about sending her away, like she was a piece of furniture," and I knew he meant to sell her, or worse. That night, a text buzzed on my Finino name. No details, just, want to know where she is tonight? Bring money straight up blackmail. And I didn't take the bait. I screenshotted it and sent it to my lawyer, Samantha, who called back right away. Don't respond. We've got enough to bring in DCF and the police. Just be ready. We'll meet you there in an hour. So that's how I ended up outside Building 2B. Rain coming down in sheets, Samantha and a social worker and a cop with me. All business knocking on Rick's door, him answering like we just ruined his night, trying to slam it shut. But the cop put a boot in the way, and suddenly, for the first time, Rick realized he wasn't the biggest dog in the fight. The apartment was worse than before dark, reeking, bottles everywhere. Emma curled up in the corner with her teddy bear. Not a tear left in her, just hollow eyes. And when the social worker knelt down and asked if she was hurt, Emma just shook her head, sleeves slipping back to show old bruises and fresh cuts. We handed over all the evidence. The texts, the witness statements, the neighbor's warning, and Rick exploded, screaming I was trying to kidnap his daughter. The cop had to get between us when Rick lunged for Emma, but Emma, brave as you please, said in the smallest voice, I want to go with a man just like that. The social worker made the call. Emma was coming home with me, at least for 72 hours. First night, she cried in her sleep, clutching that teddy bear, and I just sat by her bed, promising her she was safe, swearing to myself I'd never let her go back. Not if I could help it next morning. Took her to the doctor, checked out the bruises and malnutrition, and the psychologist wrote up a report that'd make you cry, talking about fear and trauma, but also hope because she was still willing to trust, still willing to believe in something better. Of course, Rick wasn't done. He filed for a supervised visit, showed up trying to play the loving dad in front of the social worker, but couldn't hold the act. Went from sweet talk to threats in 2 minutes flat, hissing, you'll always be mine, and Emma finally found her voice, trembling but clear, I don't want to go back there just like that. The mask slipped, and the social worker wrote down every word. Rick's lawyer took the smear campaign, online tabloid articles, fake posts, rumors that I'd abducted her for God knows what reason. Me business partners got jumpy. The press circled, but I didn't care about any of it, only about Emma, and making sure she'd never have to go back to that dump again. Court day came smaller room than I expected, but no less tense. Rick's lawyer tried to paint me as some obsessed billionaire, twisted every fact, but Samantha took it all apart, laid out the medical reports, the neighbor's testimony, the threats, the blackmail, and finally, Emma herself, clutching her teddy bear, told the judge in her own words, I want to live with Uncle Michael. I'm scared to go back there, and it was over. Judge granted me custody for 90 days, Rick restricted to supervised visits, and as I carried Emma out of that courtroom, her arms around my neck, I knew this was just the start of teaching her what safety felt like, what home meant. We made it a home. The two of Usher drawings on the fridge, toys where my office furniture used to be, cookies in the oven instead of takeout on the counter, and bit by bit, she learned to trust, to smile, to sleep without fear at night. She'd whisper, this is my home now, isn't it? And I'd answer, every time it is ours and nobody else's. But the real test came 3 months later, the final hearing. Rick beaten down by the evidence, by his own actions, and Emma changed almost beyond recognition, no longer the silent, trembling kid, but a girl who laughed, made friends, raised her hand in class, and looked the judge straight in the eye when she was asked where she wanted to be. The judge stripped Rick of all rights, gave me permanent custody, and it was Donnie, no cheers, no grand gesture, just a deep, grateful breath and a promise that from now on, Emma would never have to beg for milk or anything else. You know, people think big gestures change the world, but most of the time, it's just a quiet choice, say a carton of milk, a listening ear. The decision not to walk away. Kindness isn't about saving the world. It's about saving one person at a time, doing the right thing even when nobody's looking. So that's our story, a story about a little girl who just wanted milk and a man who couldn't forget what it was like to be cold and hungry, and how 2 broken lives made a whole one together. Makes you think, right? If you were in my shoes, would you have stepped in or would you have looked away? Tell me below which moment hit you the hardest and why. Let's talk about what justice really means, what home really is, because at the end of the day, we're all just looking for someone to make us feel safe, even if it's only with a glass of milk and a promise.